Hi. So last time I did one of these videos, I was looking at the first verse of chapter 38 of the book of Job. And we saw there that Job had just been through such a horrific time, losing everything, having his friends give him a really hard time, and just everything going wrong for Job. And all the way through the rest of the book of Job, God had been silent. And then we saw the first verse of chapter 38, Job hears God speaking out of the silence. And we thought a little bit about that. And I said at the time, I'll come back to what God said exactly a little bit later. So here we are. That's what we're going to do now. And just think about what it is that that God says, because God doesn't exactly give Job a proper, clear answer. But what he does is he says, look at me and look at what I'm like. Basically, look at me and look at what I'm like. So he starts off thinking about, he basically asks a whole series of questions to Job. So he says, were you there when I laid the earth's foundation? So Job's been questioning God about all that's going on, and God speaks and he says, look, what do you know, Job? You're just a little human being. I was there when the earth was originally created. Right from the beginning, I was there. I was in control. Were you there, Job? Job has to say, no, of course not. And then he talks about God talks about his control over creation. So he says, were you there? Have you given orders for the sun to rise, for the dawn to break? Job clearly has to say, well, no. And God says, well, I have. And he goes on and he says, look, do you cause it to snow? Do you cause the weather to happen? Can you control the wind? Can you control the rain? Job has to say, well, no, I can't. And God is implying, well, I can. And then God continues to give the illustration of creation. Can you make the animals hunt? So he says, do you hunt the prey for the lionesses and satisfy the hunger of the lions? God's talking about he controls every tiny little aspect of creation, everything that's going on. Job says, no, I don't do that. But God says, I am causing all of those things. I'm causing the lions to be able to hunt. Can you do that? No, says Job. Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? Do you count the months till they bear? God's asking all these questions that Job cannot answer, but implicitly God is saying, but I can answer because I'm God. And therefore, he's saying, well, look, Job, these big questions you've got, you're doubting my sovereignty, you're doubting my rule, you're doubting my goodness. And all of chapters 38 and 39 are all these questions, and God basically saying, look at my rule over this world. Look at who's really in control. Look at what I can do. Chapter 39, verse 26. Does the hawk take flight by your wisdom? Job, what do you know God is implying? What do you know about how this world works and why things happen as they happen? And Job is going to have to say, well, I don't know better than you, God. And there are times when we think we know better than God about how this world works and why things happen and what happens when it happens. But actually, Job 38 and 39 says, God knows everything and he knows better. And he's in control. He's ruling over all things. We're not in control of this world, despite our technology, despite the wealth that we have in the Western world. This virus has shown actually we are very, very vulnerable. But as those who trust in Jesus, we know that God is ruling over all things. And at the beginning of chapter 40, God says this to Job: "Will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him." God's basically saying, do you know better than me, Job? Do you know my plans better? Do you know what's best? Do you know why things happen more than I do? Who are you to question me on what I'm doing? God is basically saying. And Job answers God, "I am unworthy, how can I repay you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more." Job realises how great and mighty God is and how insignificant he is, and his response is to repent, to ask God's forgiveness. We need to repent for our pride and for our arrogance, and ask for God's forgiveness. Seek his face. But most of all, know that God's wisdom is perfect. Know that God's rule is perfect. Know that God is in control over all things, even what we're going through now. Have a look at chapter 38 and 39, the beginning of chapter 40 of the book of Job. And why not have a bit of a read of it for yourselves? And I look forward to seeing you again soon.